Hi, I'm Danielle Carron, and in this podcast, I'm going to share with you knowledge and tools that I believe should be accessible to everyone. They're fundamental and essential to being human. Embody Your Power is an integrative model that bridges science, spirituality, and ancient wisdom to give you the resources needed to live your fullest potential. As a psychotherapist for over 16 years and now as a coach, I help people know, reclaim, and embody their power on all levels. It's my mission to help you connect to your unshakable resilience, to know true power and freedom, to be sovereign and to remember your divine nature. If you're wanting to learn tools to release layers of conditioning, heal from trauma, feel at home in your body, have inner peace, expand your capacity for joy, connect spiritually, and take a journey with me to embody your power, then this podcast is for you. Thank you for joining me. Together, let's raise our consciousness to help evolve humanity. I'm sitting here with Dick Schwartz, the developer and genius behind the internal family systems model, which is just exploding right now in the psychotherapy world. Dick, what an incredible week it's been here on the magical island of Molokai, where everything just seems to slow down. Before we dive in, I want to express my deep gratitude for you and the work and the wisdom that you've brought to the world. It's truly changed my life. I would say out of all the things that I've been trained in, it's been the most influential and impactful personally and professionally. It's been the most impactful because it's really been a big part of me embodying my power. And it's done that by giving me the tools to access myself, as you call it, and separating out from all the different parts of me. In doing so, I've been able to access my true essence. And what a gift. I really want to thank you for that. So let's start with a definition of self. Dick, how would you describe self with a capital S?
So it is something that is in everybody. And, when I first encountered it, I thought it was really challenging to find words. But when I saw it in action in terms of helping people access this sort of essence, and then spontaneously they would start to relate to their, what I call parts in a healing way, certain qualities would be manifest that were pretty evident. So we have what we call the 8 C's of self-leadership, which include calm, and then curiosity, and confidence, so related to power, and compassion, and then clarity, creativity, connectedness, and courage. Oddly enough, they all began with the letter C. There are others that didn't begin with the letter C, so I didn't include them for that reason.
Do you want to name some of them?
Sure. There's joy and equanimity and vision. Some people are lobbying to have a 9th C of choice. And but all these wonderful qualities seem to be at the essence of all of us. That's a big deal, and the fact that you can access that so quickly, many people can,
right?
And that it knows how to heal you and heal relationships.
Yeah. And so, where else does self exist, would you say?
Well, I came into this not a spiritual person at all, and but to reconcile this discovery of this is in everybody, can't be damaged, and knows how to heal, with my training, which was an attachment theory that said to have any of that, you had to have gotten it from a relationship. It's not inherent in us. You have to get it from a good parenting initially, or from a therapist or someplace outside of yourself. And I just couldn't, at some point I had to say that doesn't work, that there is this. And people started pointing me toward different spiritual traditions to say, well, maybe it's like Buddha nature, maybe it's like Atman, maybe it's like, as I look into that, it turned out to be true.
Yeah, I love that quote that you have about right beneath the surface of all of our parts is this presence that many religions have different names for.
Yeah.
And you call self.
And I called self. And so it did seem that I had stumbled onto something pretty universal that's in people that, as you say, most all the spiritual traditions know about, have ways to access. And I stumbled onto a way to access it very quickly. And then, in contrast to some of the traditions that see it as a state to try and achieve and to try and kind of passively witness from, I was finding it became an active inner leader and outer leader. And
that's such a gift to be able to access it so quickly and not to feel like you have to spend years meditating to get there.
Yeah. So at some point I kind of got the big deal of that and the vision of it. And if we could all do that, what a different world it would be. And then I also started to actually learn from what I call guides that this self isn't individual to each of us, that the metaphor I like the best is from quantum physics, that photons are both a particle and a wave, and that maybe this is a particleized state of self that actually is part of a big wave of self that I call the big self, or the non-dual, or all the words you use for that.
Like what people might call God or source or divine, the universe.
Yeah.
You call big self.
Big self, capital S, and that this is a drop of that big ocean. And so that really started making sense to me, and it made sense that at that larger level, we're all very connected. And we have a kind of knowledge of that in self, that seaward connectedness. So I've become very, very spiritual, not adhering to any particular tradition necessarily.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if we look at the macrocosm, we have big self, and then we have self, which we can access within our body.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have parts.
Mm-hmm.
And so on the microcosmic level, we have parts that have self.
Yeah, that blew my mind too. I stumbled on that when I was working with what used to be called multiple personality disorder clients. Now it's DID. And as a result, because there was no self to be found initially, I'd work with one part for maybe 10 sessions in a row, where I was just talking to the part who was talking to me. And the part started talking about its parts. And I could access itself to work with its parts.
Wow.
And I actually went down one level lower. And it turns out it's, turtles all the way down from that expression. That it's like fractals. They're we're all just the same, isomorphic form, different levels.
So as you say that, I'm thinking like how self is indestructible if it's like fractally always there, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. Can't be damaged, indestructible.
Yeah. Also, what an incredible gift to be able to access that and know that.
Yeah.
And so what's it like for you to connect to big self? How is that for you?
I don't do it. I meditate and I get a hit of it, but not like when I, for example, take ketamine and actually leave here and totally enter that big self state. And it was after a few of those experiences that I really kind of before I believed in it, but now I know it.
Yeah.
And
can you describe the experience at all for you?
Yeah. So I have no contact with my body, and I'm in this kind of bliss-filled sense of connection to everything. So you kind of lose your individuality, but it's very, very enjoyable.
Yeah.
And there is some more access to guides. People watching me would hear me say, "Okay, I won't forget. I won't forget." And yeah, and then coming back from that state, I just remember thinking, "Oh no, here's that time thing again," and because there isn't any sense of time there.
Yeah.
And I'm coming back into this body. It keeps me so separate from everybody, and has all these burdens, and so it was kind of disappointing. But I did feel like I needed to come back. So.
Yeah, well, so that's exactly what I experienced in a near-death experience, where it was timeless. There was no body. There was no form. A sense of interconnectedness, a sense of love, belonging. There's no fear. Really beautiful. Space to enter and experience.
Yeah, and similarly, before that personal experience, I kind of thought that after you die, it would be just a transition to another statement. Again, now I kind of know that. And that actually helps in life to know that death isn't to be feared that same way.
Right. And that's what I also feel like is when we really know our true nature, how powerful that is, right? That death is not the end.
Yeah, in terms of your podcast, in terms of power, it really helps to know who you really are. And that's very powerful.
Yes, yeah. And so would you like to share a little bit about how you got this information from guides, or were they an important part in bringing this modality and this information to the world?
Initially I didn't know from guides, and I thought, God, I'm so smart. I've created this thing that everybody loves. And I came out of my family of origin with a lot of burdens, a lot of sense of worthlessness and not being valuable. And that's part of what drove me to deal with the slings and arrows that came with trying to bring this, and just keep pursuing it. And again, I needed the accolades to counter the worthlessness. And so I would be defensive if anybody challenged it, and I would sort of be much more narcissistic about it than I am now. And so I needed all that to bring it, but then I found myself the leader of a community, and a lot of those qualities weren't working very well.
I could imagine.
And I was fortunate enough to have people that could tell me and call me on it. And so I began to believe that I really needed to do more work on myself. And I did get a message at that point, one of the few messages that has ever come to me directly from my guides, that some version of, we gave this to you, don't fuck it up. And I was fucking it up. And so with all that, I really set out to work on the parts that felt so worthless and needed the accolades. And
what does that look like when Dick Schwartz does the work on himself? Does it look any different than you doing the work with other people?
Well, it looks different mainly because, in contrast to most people, I don't see my parts at all. I have a condition I've learned very late in the game called aphantasia, which I don't know the percentage, but it's under 10% of us have. We just don't see much inside. And so when I'm working with my parts, it's not so much images, it's much more sensations and sort of voices, and I can tell how close I am to them, but it's like I'm doing it in the dark, basically. And there was a point early on again where I thought how ironic that I'm the one who's bringing this, and yet I'm the only one who can't do it.
Right.
But then it turned out I just do a different version of it. And I'll often, we were psychodramatizing the work this week. I'll often do that. I'll try to use empty chairs and I'll have my parts talk to me and like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I often need somebody to help me with it all. So it's not all that much I can do on my own.
Mm-hmm. And so you mentioned your guides in this direct information that you got. Do you sense your guides around you? Do they have names or
I can
images?
sense them. They don't have names.
Okay.
At least I haven't named them. But I'm gotten quite familiar with their energy. I can tell when they're nearby, and I can also tell when they're kind of in my body and I'm speaking from them.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So there are many times when I'm doing a lecture or even doing sessions where I think, where did that come from? I'll say something that seems really smart, but I didn't come out of my brain. So again, that took a while to be aware of, but people who can see them would tell me they could see a bunch of these guides hovering around and coming through me.
Yeah, and so would you say you sense them often?
Yeah, now I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what would you say the difference would be between big self and guides? Or how would you make sense of that?
There is a difference. The guides are also drops of the ocean. They're just not embodied. And
so that more of the wave versus the particle? Or
yeah, they have, sometimes they have, I don't see them still, but many people can see them in different forms.
Mm-hmm.
And, there was a point where, and my story is, this woman, Carrie, came up to me at a workshop and said, I've been getting messages for you. Are you interested? And she has a different story, and probably hers is more accurate. I can't remember what it is exactly, but I said yes. And so she and I have been meeting trading sessions for about, I think we figured out like 16 years now.
Wow, okay.
And she is and was a channel for her guides. And then she was able to channel my guides too. So that's where I've gotten most of my information about guides. And it took me a while I had very skeptical parts, which I think is probably why the guides picked me, because I really wasn't one of these people that just went with it. And
that was going to be a question. Like, do you feel like they chose you?
Yeah, and it's still unclear why. I think the only things I can figure out are that there was a point after college where I did TM for a long time, and I could get a hit of the big self, and I think they saw, well, maybe he's open to that, and then I eschewed the traditional psychotherapy and psychoanalysis, those beliefs, and went in the other direction toward family therapy and became steeped in systems thinking. And I think they liked that a lot. They liked that I came to the phenomena with kind of, open-minded, and that I could put together all this stuff through systems thinking. Mm-hmm. So that's about as far as I've gotten in terms of figuring out why.
Yeah. How do you feel about that you have been chosen, or that this information is coming through you?
Most of the time I feel very lucky and privileged, and because I love the work. I just, my wife Jean would say I love it too much and it takes up too much space. But, and I also, though, particularly lately, feel a lot of the responsibility of continuing to bring it in a clear, pure way. And
that was very evident to me this time with you this week, is seeing how pure it comes through you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was actually wanting to ask you if that feels really important, that's how the model is taught in this very pure essence of it.
It is important. And I do encourage people to use my words, for example, because they've been honed over 40 years. They're coming from the guides, much of them, and there are a lot of people that don't like that. They think I'm trying to impose some kind of authoritarian thing, but the messages I'm getting is that this is important to convey in a pure way, as much as we can.
Yeah, I really appreciated.
And there are people who go their own way and actually add, and I can kind of tell when it's additive and also when it's kind of distracting.
Yeah. How do you feel about people adding or integrating?
No, I'm very welcome when it's coming from their self, and I think that characterizes IFS and me, the openness and how many different people are combining it with different things. And
right, because at the conference, right, I imagine there's many different people speaking about IFS in various aspects and how it works with this and that, and combining it with different modalities.
It became clear also that I'm limited in where I can bring it and how far I can take it, and that there needs to be other people who embody the vision of it, who can take it places I can't. So I've, continued to, when I meet new people that have that potential, I'm very open. So Jean again would say sometimes way too open, and we just kind of check it out and see if this is one of those people or not. And so I've come down a lot of dead ends, and then also been blessed to have now some many collaborators who can take it places I can't.
That's incredible. Yeah, I really appreciate that about you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so when the guides were coming through, this woman, Carrie is her name, was there something that she shared that you thought, well, okay, this is valid, with the skeptical parts and stuff? Was there something that eventually came through that you were able to then trust?
Yeah, I can't think of the first one of those things. One that stands out to me, though, is after working together for about a year. At the time, I was single. I divorced, I think it was 2003, and then was single for 5 years and was dating and couldn't find somebody and was really getting frustrated. And so my sessions with her, I just said, could you ask what the deal is? Am I ever going to find somebody? And they said, she's there and it's about 6 months away if you do these pieces of work.
Wow.
It's not going to happen if you don't do it.
Did you have to do some homework?
Yeah. So there were certain parts I had to work with. And then 6 months later, Jean showed up at Esalen, and the rest is history.
Oh,
so
wow.
then I thought, whoa, that's impressive.
That is impressive. I love hearing that. The other thing I'd love to touch on with you is how burdens impact our connection with self and big self.
Yeah, so definition of burdens are extreme beliefs and emotions and energies that enter our system in various ways, a lot through trauma, but they can be what we call legacy burdens and come in through the generations or the culture, and attach to our parts and then drive the way they operate in extreme ways. And most all of us have a lot of those burdened parts. So the parts in their extreme roles are driven by these burdens. And it took me a long time to figure all that out, because like most other systems, I was assuming the parts were what they seemed to be. So, it took a while to figure out that they're all really valuable, but they get forced into these roles, partly by the burdens and partly by just being frozen in the past, and partly by how they polarize with each other and get extreme from that. So, again, a lot of the systems thinking took a lot from family therapy and brought it onto this. And just actually put out a paper in a journal called Family Process, where we went over all the theories of family therapy and how they all apply to this inner world. It's really fun to do.
I bet.
And so it also became clear that burdens obscure access to the client self, because the parts tend to blend with self and take over when they have the burdens. And then it became clear that when that's the case, clients don't have access to that higher spiritual wisdom because they're covered in these burdened parts. So some of the power of helping clients unburden is to give them more access to their guides. And that also is bringing more of the guidance to the planet. So there's a bigger purpose to the whole thing.
Yeah, why would you say we have burdens?
Why do we have them?
Yeah.
Well, when I've asked the guides that, they said that this is a kind of school, this planet, and it's a really hard one. And they're really proud of us for choosing to come here to learn. And the lesson plan, part of the lesson plan is in the set of burdens we get. So as we unburden, we're doing what we're here to do, and we're learning the lessons. And we're learning, we're bringing self to this planet too, which is part of the lesson plan as well.
Yeah, and so as you're talking about that, I'm thinking about humanity. And what would you say your greatest wish is for humanity?
If everyone knew this about themselves and also knew that the parts they hate and inside of them and the people they hate outside of them weren't what they seem to be, and that attacking them or exiling them only makes them stronger. If everybody got that, it would be a different world. And so that we would come to each other from self with love and all the other C words, even when somebody's out of line, you're just going to help them back into self. Because self is contagious. So if I can bring myself, it'll pull for whoever my enemy is, their self. And if they're open to it, I can help them with their troubled parts.
Beautiful. I love that.
Thank you.
Yeah. One of my favorite quotes comes from you, Dick, which is, "Nothing has power over you unless you fear it." I've used this so much in my own life. And so I'd love if you would like to elaborate on that, where that came from and just all that it can apply to.
Mm-hmm. So if I can help a client, maybe they're tormented by what seems to be a massive critic, for example, that drives them crazy and that they feel like they're powerless against. If I can get their parts that feel that way into, say, an inner waiting room, and just get them all to separate so they really are in self. And I just stumbled into this because I would just ask these parts.
You're curious.
Mm-hmm. And keep asking, now how do you feel toward this critic? At some point they'll say, oh, I feel calm. I don't feel afraid of it at all. And I can see that it's just hurting too. and their conversation with it will be very different. And they'll be able, instead of being cowed by it, they'll be able to not control it, but help it unburden itself, and it'll transform. And then
that's so powerful. That's really us accessing and embodying our power when we can do that.
Yeah. So that, and just the idea that there aren't any bad ones, and that they're all in these extreme states. And I didn't really get that. I sort of thought, well, maybe that's true, but then I deliberately started consulting for a treatment center for sex offenders, and started working with the parts that had done such horrible things to women. And they would all show their secret histories of how, when they were being abused, it wasn't always sexually abused as children, but abused in different ways. They would look around the room and say, who has power in this room? It's the guy doing this to me. I'm going to take on his energy to protect my system from him. And then they get stuck with the burden of the desire to hurt vulnerability, or the desire to,
like the illusion of power in a way, right? Or
I mean,
it's power, but it's power, not like a true essence of power.
Yeah, I mean, it's a perverted power. It's a power. It's the power over. It's power designed to hurt and inflict pain, or to dominate and control.
Mm-hmm.
And when we could unburden those energies, those parts would transform into their valuable states too. So that really convinced me that there aren't any bad ones. And so if you translate that into the outside world, there's no bad people. There's just burdened people.
Yes. Do you apply this? Nothing has power over me unless I fear it in the outside world as well?
Yeah, I mean, there are people that can kill you, but if you can stay in self relative to others, like I said earlier, it's contagious. So, I haven't faced down people with a gun in my face, but I've dealt with people who were very interested in hurting me. And if I could stay in self, it didn't totally melt those parts, but once they got clear that they couldn't hurt me, then it took all their energy away.
That's incredible. Yeah.
Yeah.
How would you say that you embody your power? What does that mean to you?
Yeah. I think I have some power to bring this to the world. And so as I do that, I'm embodying some level of power. I'm not a good administrator. I'm not, that interested in having a lot of status and money. After I worked with all those parts that needed all the accolades, I want to bring this as far as I can in this lifetime.
Yeah.
And
do you have a vision you would share for where you would like to bring this?
Well, maybe a decade ago, I got the guidance that I'm supposed to bring this beyond psychotherapy and try to bring it to higher levels of system. And so for this last decade, I've made a lot of alliances with people that can do that.
Awesome.
Various social activist leaders, and we're starting a training in the spring for social activists. Not for executive coaches, because corporate
at
leaders,
that high level.
Yeah, they have huge influence.
Excellent.
And I'm quite involved in the psychedelics movement and trying to have IFS be at least one of the maps for that territory. And
beautiful.
So because I also see a lot of potential in that movement of bringing a lot more guidance, because when you get into psychedelic territory, like I said, with me and ketamine, the guides have a lot more access to you. So all those realms are, and working with institutions. There's a guy named Bill Isaacs who's been using IFS with the World Bank and with the IMF and depolarizing the board and the staff. And so,
Wow.
so
That's big.
It can have that kind of global influence. And that's what I mean. I'm now connected to people who can bring it to those places. I never could, but yeah.
Yeah. I imagine that you continue to see it expand.
Yeah. No, it's especially the last decade, it's expanded enormously.
Yeah.
Not just in psychotherapy, but in the culture and in these different arenas. At our conference, one of the plenaries was where people are taking it. So there were a couple social activists. We're now much more diverse community. So there was a woman talking about all of that. And there was a woman talking about how she's been bringing it to education.
Oh, amazing.
And so on. There's a couple more, but yeah.
Yeah. It's such an honor to be here with you today. Thank you so much for all that you do and your contribution to humanity. How can people find out about your work?
Well, our website is ifs-institute.com. And that's probably the first place to look. And then there's an intro book and No Bad Parts, and a lot of books, a lot of podcasts, a lot of videos on, what's it called? YouTube.
Yeah. Beautiful. Anything else you'd like to share?
No, I mean, I'm glad to have you on the team and spreading the word in this way and other ways. And
what an honor. It's my pleasure.
It's been a great week to be with you.
It really has. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Danielle.
Thanks for listening to this podcast. If you found this episode helpful, please consider assisting me in reaching more people by sharing it with others or writing a review. Together, let's raise our consciousness to help evolve humanity. For more information, please visit my website, daniellecarron.com. That's DANIELLECARRON.com.